Hi, everyone. So excited to be here with this fabulous foursome we put together today. We've got Charles Caldwell, Catherine Chadwick, and Dave Snell. If you've been here before, you should know us pretty well. And if you're new to the show, we'd love to find out who you are, where you're from, and any questions you might have, which could allow us to be more relevant to your interests and give you something positive for your time invested today. The word of the day, like I say, is champion, and we'll start with Charles.
Yeah, thank you very much, Don. It's great to be here, and good morning, Catherine and Dave. What I would start off by saying about champion is that being a champion isn't just about winning, it's about really taking a stand for something bigger than the outcome, which we often see in many Olympic athletes, that they are often driven by a cause that's beyond just the victory. They usually have a commitment to some sort of possibility that's vivid, and the trophy is just a reminder the real victory is the transformation that they cause for themselves and also the impact that they have on others.
Okay, well, I think that's a wonderful beginning to a good hour together. Catherine?
Oh, I love that, Charles. And I think it's also so fun when you see a person championing another person, right? And it's not just for a cause, but it's actually more than a mentor. I think there's certainly mentorship involved, but I think it's so fabulous. And I would bring Don here as an example. He's championing all of us, right? And all of the other people that come on the show. And so when we refer people to him, we're in a way championing him as well. And I love the relationship of championship.
Well, that was so kind of you. Appreciate it. And it makes it all worthwhile. Dave?
Well, I think they stole my thunder. The beauty of coming in late, I guess, and being last. But I think it's very true. And I just echo what Charles and Catherine have already started with is champion. We think of the champion as the noun of, the person with the title or the one with the gold medal or the trophy. But, what are you advocating for, protecting, to fight for what matters is a championing of something. But most importantly, as Catherine pointed out, is championing others and what it is that you do for them beyond yourself. And there are times when you have to champion yourself, because you have to believe in your potential, your own worth, no matter what doubts come in, so that you can be the noun champion and win that trophy or see others do so.
Great. When I think of champion, I think of someone standing up as a result of an accomplishment. Like at the Olympics where they all gold and bronze and silver take to stand. And, what it really demonstrates is the perseverance a champion usually has. A champion's usually someone who goes further than someone else and continues to go under any circumstance. The saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's when champions start to show up, because they're looking for that springboard. They're looking for that opportunity to not only be recognized, but to confirm what they believe in themselves they're capable of. So, it's always positive whenever I see an award show or a trophy presentation to know how long these people waited and persevered, and how many people in their life are so excited for them, to be of, service to those champions. And I think there's a champion in all of us. It's just finding the cause or the interest that will make us excited about not getting a lot of sleep and not being able to wait till the morning begins. Charles?
Yeah, I think the other thing about being a champion is we rise by lifting others. And lately on social media, there have been lots of videos circulating around of individuals who've been very close to the finish line, and they pass a competitor who's injured, or something happens to a competitor, and they stop and they forego their own achievement to help a competitor across the finish line. we've seen this. Well, I've seen it in a few videos of some marathons and some steeple races, and it's really inspiring and reminds me of the concept that we rise by lifting others. So there's many, many ways of being a champion. It's not all about crossing the finish line.
Great. I love that example, and it really builds on that illustration. Well, we've got some guests here today.
Okay.
We've got Omar. Great to see Omar. Omar was commenting on last night's show too. And, you know, it's nice how different circles combine to make bigger circles. So people on this show end up on so many other shows. I know Omar is always looking for new guests. And so excited to see you, Omar. We've got Omar again saying, looks like a nice sunny day there. Today is a very nice sunny day, but Colorado has more sunny days than pretty much anybody, including Miami or Phoenix. And here's my brother-in-law, Bill Barkhouse from Space City, Houston.
Nice.
Great to see you, Bill. Looking good. Bill is a champion in my life. I've known Bill for 50 plus years and was always there just for anything he could possibly do to help, support. And he's done that with so many people. So thank you for being here, Bill. We've got Dean LeBay. And if you don't know Dean, Dean is quite a guy. Was actually an everyday audience individual when we started the show. And Dean has just an unbelievable story of perseverance and now getting ahead of everything. So thank you, Dean, for being an example for so many. With that, we're moving on to Catherine.
Well, you know, I think that I love it that the videos are circulating because it's they're like a fabulous role model, right? A fabulous example. When we help each other, we all rise. And I love that point, Charles. I also made a note when you were talking, Dave, and that sometimes we have to champion ourselves, right? And it really begins with how we talk to ourselves and how we set ourselves up and what kind of language we use when we talk to ourselves. If we're, you know, the last time I was in Toronto, Charles, it was interesting because I was with this gal and we were going to a film festival. And at that point in her life, I don't know, she got into this habit of everybody was an idiot. And, you know, calling everyone an idiot. And then she's, you know, talking to people, other drivers, what an idiot, and what an idiot. And sure enough, we get rear-ended, you know. And so, you know, that whole energetic thing of language and how you, what you're broadcasting, you got to pay attention to those things.
Yeah,
in yourself and set yourself up to win, right?
Yeah, it's so true. Dave?
Yeah, well, again, I'll echo Catherine. I mean, those videos are pretty amazing. But what amazed me more was one of the interviews they did with a guy who did stop and picked up the guy who would have won it and said, well, why'd you go back and get him? And he said, well, he beat me. Had it not been for the last 50 meters, he would have beaten me. That's the champion. He's raising others with him. He's making sure that in his mind, at least, that the real winner won. He was not going just for glory. He recognized that through the race, he had actually lost, except for that last 50 meters. And the other thing that occurred to me as we were talking, we look at the champion of the gold medal, the silver medal, whatever, the winner or second place, third place, those people who persevere and they have the resilience to go through and win, or at least place. But then we look at the videos and we see the fans, the family, the people who are lifting them up. And it occurred to me for some reason, I don't know why, maybe it's because I'm, you know, back down in Florida again. And I think about, we always recognize Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, these guys who do the crazy things that go to the moon or go to space and spacewalk. But how many thousands of people had to be a part of that process to champion the cause to make sure that they could do it? And we always forget about the workers, but they were champions in and of themselves in supporting and making sure that those missions were successful.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
And if I may, I'll just add on to that. I mean, we always think about, from a military standpoint, I'll go from my own perspective on this one is combat is usually undertaken by about 5% of the military, but it takes that other 95% of the admin, the logistics, the morale, the welfare, the casualty assistance officers, whoever it is. And I don't know why I brought up casualty assistance, but it's all those other people who make it possible for that 5% to do the dirty work that needs to be done in a mission. So that's just my 2 cents.
No, I think it's an excellent thought, because you have to ask yourself, what are you championing? You could be the champion, but what are you doing this for, and who's benefiting from it? If it's just adulation and receiving financial benefit or whatever, well, you're championing yourself and getting benefit. But I can, look back on different sports figures who inspired the country. I mean, Babe Ruth was one of them. Sometimes during the worst of times, champions show up to inspire the country, and to create movements. And I think a quality champion is someone whose efforts and success continues to champion beyond the moment in time, beyond the trophy presentation. And how it affects so many other people, like Dave said, the people who helped you get there and the people you're helping by being there. So there's a lot of different distinctions. We've got Dean, who shares. He's from New Orleans. I know last time we talked, you were going down there to help your daughter out who's in college, so hope everything's working out. Usman is a great fan of my newsletter. Great to see you. Always appreciate your support. We've got Merrill, who I see is in Leslie's carousel that seems to never end. It seems to only get bigger and actually better. It's seeing both you and Catherine live this morning. Well, a lot of times the people you see are the people who continue to show up. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a champion, right? Because keeping your commitments, supporting your obligations. Sometimes you do a lot of stuff for other reasons than you would have done without those reasons. If given the choice, it was just you solitary, it wouldn't matter, but once you add people to it and causes, it does change things. So we've got Dr. Marcia. Well, welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy what we have to say. It's great to see everybody, know where you're from. And if you have any quotes you'd like to share or questions you'd like us to go over, more than happy to. So with that, moving on to Charles.
Yeah, just checking that I'm not on mute here. I've so much to say to follow up on what everyone has shared so far. I want to share a quick story that's actually a true story. This has been fact-checked of when John F. Kennedy was touring NASA. And this is to your point, Dave. He was, of course, the Secret Service are always following them around, making sure that the president is protected. And he kind of wandered off down a hall, and everyone was hustling and bustling, chasing after him because he was going to talk to a janitor who was sweeping the floor. And he stopped and he introduced himself and said, "What's your name and what do you do here?" And the janitor turned to him and said, "My name is so-and-so, and I'm helping put man on the moon, or humans on the moon." Well, he actually said man on the moon at the time. And the point was that at every level in NASA, they were, and still are today. I mean, it's a great example of management and leadership and taking decisions and having, the freedom and the autonomy to maneuver, being accountable for decisions. But this individual recognized that while he was cleaning the floor, he was actually contributing to putting people on the moon, and was connected right into the vision of NASA. The other thing is that when we look at the discipline that it takes to become a champion. And this comes back a little bit to a point that you were bringing up, Catherine, in terms of positivity. And Don, you were mentioning this too. It's very interesting to interview some people who have become, very significant athletes and Olympic medalists, for example, or other sports where they've achieved a significant victory and level of worldwide notoriety. And it's very interesting to hear how they will explain that for them, being an athlete is not really that different than other athletes that they're competing against or other human beings. They're saying the difference is actually what they say to themselves when they wake up in the morning, that they have the mental discipline to say it's 5 a.m. and I need to get up and I need to go and I need to work out and I need to swim those lengths in the pool, even though I don't want to, and it's -10 outside. And they have that mental discipline to push through. And in terms of your story, Catherine, the topic of champion and your story about being in Toronto and your friend having a narrative about what it was like being in Toronto reminded me of something that was often said at Lamerick Education by our leaders there, and often said by Werner Erhard. And that was, whatever is coming out of your mouth is the future that you're inventing. So you better be careful what you're saying. Be careful what you wish for.
So true. Catherine?
Oh, I love that. I mean, I started the hashtag of Ultimate Mind Diet a couple of years ago because it's this very thing, what you choose to speak to yourself. What you say, what you're broadcasting, it does. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you think about the people you were talking about, the focus and the commitment that it takes. And what's fascinating is it's very intentional, I believe, in creating what I would think would be a wonderful thing to strive for, a championship culture, right? You were talking about NASA, and that's what I wrote down. It's just like, yes, absolutely. And they're very intentional about it, and they're very inclusive. And isn't that a beautiful role model?
So true. Dave?
Yeah, I was just doing some quick typing there and came across a quote from Muhammad Ali, to Charles's point. You brought that up a couple of times over the last couple of months, Charles, about what's the difference in the people willing to wake up at 5 a.m. And Muhammad Ali's line, and it rang true, and I had to search for it real quick, but champions aren't made in gyms. Champions are made from something they have deep inside them. They desire, a dream, a vision. It's something that they see beyond themselves, that they really want to accomplish what it is they're seeking, and they will go beyond the other measure of what everybody else is trying to do. And I think that's a very important part of being a champion, is that discipline. Because if we want to be consistent in our lives, we have to have discipline. We have to be willing to go that extra measure. And waking up at 5 a.m. means, if it means getting up at 5 a.m. to do what you need to get done, then you got to do it. And if you really, that dream, that vision are that important to you, you will be a champion for yourself to get beyond what's still holding you back.
Well, it seems like championship stature, it has a common thread with discipline, with belief. And I think you have to champion yourself first, and then become that champion. You've got to get all your ducks in a row, to know that you're capable, you're qualified. How many people never had that chance, but they were just as good or better than the people who got that chance? They say the definition of luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? So if you can prepare, even though it may be a long time off, but it's the ability to love what you're championing, because that will get you through the low points. That'll keep you moving and it keep you innovating, because a champion isn't born, it's developed, right? And if you can identify your strengths and build on them and have a bigger vision, right? Why are you doing this? What, if we're talking about all this sacrifice and pain at times, what does someone look at it and say, no big deal? I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger had a memoir, and he got to talk to Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali, trained just as well or better than anybody else. And he said, I didn't count the reps until pain got involved. So if I did 20 lifts and nothing happened, it didn't count. When I felt the pain, I knew I was going to start actually tearing apart muscle and rebuilding it stronger. And having that kind of philosophy goes a lot deeper than most people who walk into a gym, right? So I think that's the dividing line at times. We've got Sharon Rose Winfield here. Welcome. Absolutely. Catherine Chadwick. Mind right, vessel tight, spirit bright. That's a lot of good stuff in just 6 words. Thank you for bringing that to the world, Sharon. Meryl's here, says, so nice to see you once again, Catherine. Love that story of karma and what we attract. Dean says, talk with Jim Ryan back in '76. He didn't know the 4-minute mile wasn't possible till someone told him it was. He decided to question why. Great story, Dean. Thanks for bringing it up. Nice to meet you, Dave Snell. Muhammad Ali was my all-time favorite boxer. He will always be known as a champion to me. And actually, I'll share a Muhammad Ali story to kind of confirm and validate what you just said. I happened to be in Las Vegas the night that Mike Tyson was fighting someone early on, 30 years ago plus. And all these great boxers were walking down the aisle to get to the arena. And I was fortunate to be in the crowd. And, everybody was cheering. They had Hollywood stars and singers and things like that. And all of a sudden, Muhammad Ali enters the arena. And was walking. He's got bodyguards around him. And he spots a young boy in a wheelchair. And he darts right to that boy and talks to him for like a minute, close to his ear. And the boy's parents are behind him, just weeping. And, I saw that and I said, well, this is a true champion, right? Anybody can get into a ring, but how many people are going to spot somebody sincerely and want to spend time with them and encourage them? So that was my quick story. One last comment before we swing it over to Charles, I believe. Am I wrong? Usually when I'm talking, it goes to Charles. Gratitude is my brand, and MVS is my tagline. I love Mo Ali because he rhymes. Thank you, Sharon. Charles.
Yeah, as I was listening to people sharing, it reminded me of a story about a musician from Detroit. And I can't remember his name, but the movie that was made about him was called Searching for Sugar Man. And he was a very popular singer during his day, but he was taken advantage of by various managers. It was one of those stories where he became popular, but the managers were taking all the money, and he ended up not having enough money and having to stop singing. But what he didn't realize was actually on the other side of the planet in South Africa, he was a massive sensation. And 2 South African journalists, this is a true story, actually decided to figure out what happened to Sugar Man, because he never came here for a concert. He stopped producing music. What happened to him? So they did a big investigation, a big journalistic story, investigative journalism. And they traced him and they found him in Detroit. and they convinced him to go to South Africa. And he went to South Africa, and it was like Elvis arriving.
Mm.
And he was a musical champion. And it reminded me of how some of you have shared about, that just what happens to people over time. And he was absolutely a champion, but people didn't know that, and he didn't know that. He had no idea. And this rebirthed his entire musical career in South Africa. And I don't think that there was any opportunity for him to get any of the money back that had been stolen from him. But it didn't matter because he had a huge following in South Africa. And he ended up going on and producing a few more albums and doing lots of concerts. And he also was an individual that was driven by something greater than himself. For him, he was very humble. It was not about the fame. When he did discover the fortune and the fame, he started charities and started all sorts of philanthropic work, so that all the money that he got, he actually gave away to help his neighborhood in Detroit and to help neighborhoods in South Africa.
That was a wonderful story. Thanks, Charles. Catherine?
Oh, I loved the story about what you experienced in Las Vegas, Don, and talking about him being a champion. And what came to mind is those parents are champions. Were champions too. When you think of all of the time and the attention and the effort that's required, when you're raising children, and when you either champion them or you don't, basically. And I think it's difficult sometimes with the social media and everything the way it is, and the voices of gloom and doom and that are out there. But when you think about the number of families that are really championing their kids, it's to be applauded. It's to be recognized. And I'm just, that's the point I'm making.
Point. Dave?
Yeah, Charles, I did a quick search, and it's the guy's name was Steven Segerman or Sugarman. It's spelled Segerman, but it went by Sugar was his nickname. So that was the character you're talking about. I think that's a wonderful story. And I think it reminds me of my favorite soccer player back in the 1990 World Cup. And the story is that champions, we always think of the champion as the one who wins the gold medal, for example. In this case, we'll go with somebody like Caitlyn Jenner, Bruce Jenner, whatever you want to call him or her. At the time, it was Bruce Jenner. Won the gold medal, and we see him for years and years and years. Then he comes Caitlyn. Okay, he's a champion. But not all champions stay in the spotlight, and people have lives and they go on to do other things. And my favorite soccer player was Salvatore Scalacci. He was the Italian striker in 1990 World Cup. They came in third, even though they were expected to win because it was being played in Italy beyond that. But it reminded me that, after years of wondering what happened to his career, I found out he was working in a tire factory, or not even a factory, but just kind of a junkyard that took on old tires in Sicily. He was a Sicilian soccer player, but I think he played up in the mainland somewhere for a number of years. But not all champions stay in the spotlight, and we have to remember them too. And they go on to do other things. And I bring it up because it leads me to the second point, is sometimes the quietest champions are the loudest champions. You don't have to be the boisterous, and I'm not trying to disparage Muhammad Ali. I have lots of great things he said, but he was a very loud and outspoken person, especially in his youth. He would, the way he would be theatrical with the cameras and the microphones. And so, but it's the people behind the scenes, as we've mentioned before. And it's some of those people that never get any recognition. And I'll bring in another quick story of my own. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but for years I had championed, not even years, it was while we were deployed in Iraq. And then shortly afterwards, one of my sailors was junior, very junior sailor. And some guys up north in Mosul needed a new analyst. They needed somebody very fast. And I said, look, you guys are asking for an E7, E8. I've got an E4. I think he might have been an E5. I don't know. but he's one of the best I've got, and I think you're going to enjoy him, and he's going to be the guy you need. Well, they didn't believe me, and I said, look, it's that or nothing. And they said, well, send him up, we'll work with him. And he turned out to be one of the best that could ever be. And when an E7, E8 came up to replace him, when he got rotated back to San Diego, I got a call from my Army counterpart saying, bring back JT, he's the guy, this guy's worthless. And I said, look, but the point is that we champion these people silently. He never heard me talk about them that way to the guys in Mosul, and he turned out to be one of the best. And sometimes it comes back to you when you do this quietly, because like I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, 15 years later, he invited me to his wedding, and he told everybody about me, but I had no idea it had such an impact. I honestly, and I'll bring it up again, I was in tears through that wedding. Actually, not through the wedding, but through the party afterwards, because everybody was talking to me about it. So sometimes the quietest people, the quietest championing is the best championing. We don't always have to be loud and boisterous about it in the crowds.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful distinguishing point that you make. And Catherine reiterated that there's a lot of people who do what they do without anybody knowing what they're doing or what they did, but the people do. There's a lot of quiet champions out there, and a lot of champions like it that way. You know, Frank Sinatra, what I heard, for every engagement he got paid for, he did a free benefit at the same time. So he was about 50-50. And the last story I read, he was getting out of a show and getting his limo, and he saw a lady crying over on the corner there, and asked his driver, go up and see what's going on. And she said, well, she wanted your autograph. And he walked over, and I guess her son was in the hospital. And he said, I'll give you my autograph for sure. He took off 2 of his favorite cufflinks that he paid over $5,000 for and gave it to her. And then had the bodyguard find out where the son was and took care of all the bills. And, you know, so much of this never gets talked about. You know, you see the public side, you see the media side, but you don't always see the real side. And, you know, without that, it's not, you know, there's not balance that's necessary, because you got to weigh the good with the bad, you know, and everybody has some redeeming features or experiences. And I think to encourage more people to do more that they can do for others is another way of helping champion the cause for more people. Sean Michael is here. Howdy to all from Guatemala. Great to see such a worldwide audience coming together today. Charles?
Yeah, a couple of stories come to mind, and one of them is Steve Buscemi, I believe his name is. He's quite a famous Hollywood actor who also early in his career was a firefighter. And he very quietly, after 9/11 happened, he just showed up at his fire hall and put on gear and went out and supported the search for survivors in the immediate days after 9/11, and was there for quite some time, supporting until other commitments came up. And another individual that did a lot of work similar to your story about Frank Sinatra was Robin Williams. And he was notorious for going to all different places, going to hospitals, going to soup kitchens, working with the homeless, trying to encourage them, another one is Johnny Depp, who goes into hospitals a lot and works with kids who have terminal illnesses and does all sorts of things to encourage them. You know, and you ask yourself, who are the real champions now? But a good example of how we rise by lifting others, and also a great example of humility.
Yeah, definitely. Catherine?
Well, it's interesting too, because the path to being that champion is not necessarily linear, right? And there are usually a lot of pitfalls and stumbles along the way. And the perseverance that's required to get back up and say, okay, what did I learn from that? And come back even stronger. I think that's really what it takes. And I think that it's not just attaining that championship, but it's the character that evolves, the character that's developed in the path of being a champion, right?
Yeah, there's a lot more to it than just the photo op. Dave?
Yeah, I was going to say also for Robin Williams, I guess there was something in his contracts that he insisted that some number, maybe 5, 10, 20, whatever it was, people who worked on every one of his films had to be homeless. He gave them jobs and opportunities. And it was written in his contract it had to happen. What a wonderful guy he was, and what a broad range of skills he brought to the screen, and I really appreciated. I was very disappointed and saddened the day he died. We lost out on a great champion there for many causes. I don't know that I have too much else to add. I mean, it occurs to me, to your point, Catherine, that let me think this out as I go here for a second, is it's not linear. And to get to be a champion, you're going to take hits, you're going to take falls, you're going to take spills, whatever you want to call them. And Rocky comes to mind. And you want to talk about a champion. And David Goggins brings this up in his talks and in his podcast episodes he's done, is imagine the champion. You've got Carl Weathers' character, I forget his name in the movie off the top of my head now, Apollo. He thinks he's won. He's got Rocky on the ropes. He's down on the mat. And then Rocky gets up. And Apollo's head just goes, oh my God, what is up with this guy? He just was not going to quit. And he took the long way to get there. He took the hits, he took the falls, but he still became a champion. Rocky is the movie I first thought of when I heard the word champion.
Yeah, I could still see him in the Philadelphia library or whatever, him jumping up and down.
Yep.
And you feel for him because he's a common person. There was nothing that said champion about him when you first meet him at the beginning of the movie. But I think
he got his own coach who's telling him he's worthless.
Well, and I think sometimes, one thing about adversity, it either overcomes you or you overcome it. Yeah. There is no middle ground. And at a certain point when you don't think things can get any worse, you start getting better, because you have nothing to lose, right? When you're at rock bottom, whatever you do is not going to be any worse in a way. And I think that's the American story, the success story, the rags to riches, the Horatio Alger, and to Charles's point, we're waiting for a champion to show up, somebody that can inspire, encourage, bring people together, because there's so much opportunity and we're wasting it with a lot of small, frivolous, if that's kind to say, when we could be developing more champions, having championship schools, that really focus on motivation and, encouragement, not just, learning the ABCs. Here's a good question from Sean. What signals should leaders pay attention to if they want to find hidden champions in their teams or communities? Wonderful question. Actually, Charles and I and a couple other wonderful individuals were kind of discussing this at Charles's live stream last night. And it seems so universal now that questions like this are directly coming in regard to it. So we'll go around the circle, and if anybody in the panel can answer that, that'd be great. Sharon says resilience and perseverance. And Sean comes back with, what's one act of recognition that changed your trajectory or restored your faith in your own voice? That's another great question. You've got to come here more often, Sean. We need more great questions. So I'll swing it over to Charles and let him choose which or both he'd like to address.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to just mention is one of the best business books I ever read, in addition to the dynamics of taking charge, Don, that we were talking about earlier today on my LinkedIn Live, was by Edward de Bono, called called Tactics: The Art and Science of Success. And he went out and he interviewed individuals who were successful across a wide spectrum: business people, athletes, doctors, you name it, a whole variety of people that have been successful, authors, writers. And one of the people he interviewed was a race car driver. And the theme of his book was failure and having a positive relationship to failure. And the race car driver was talking about how he would much rather get behind the wheel. In what he meant was, metaphorically, get behind the mind or get into the mind of someone who's failed and then succeeded because of the lessons that they've learned. It comes back to your point, Catherine, about developing that resilience and that perseverance after you've had a setback, but then you've gone on to be successful and to become a champion or have some kind of a victory. And that was one of the most powerful parts of that book, Tactics: The Art and Science of Success, the whole section on failure. And a lot of these leaders all have the same sort of story, but I remember the race car driver was talking metaphorically about, I'd much rather get behind the wheels of someone who's failed and understand their mind when they've gone on and been successful despite failure. And in terms of the question, what signals should leaders pay attention to if they want to find hidden champions in their teams or communities? I have an answer right off the top of my head, but I might let Dave talk about that, because I know that in the military, they have a methodology for looking for leaders. I could be wrong, Dave, about that, but my understanding is that in some parts of the military, and not just the US military, but many military, they actually look for, again, it comes back to we rise by lifting others. They don't look for the people that are necessarily stronger. They look for the individuals who are helping others. So, they're doing the third 10K on a beach and someone's not going to make it. And two guys come up beside somebody who's not going to make it, and they're like, we're not doing a fourth 10K. You're finishing this 10K if we have to carry you. And that's when the instructors will say, okay, here are some leaders here, because they're supporting their team and they understand their teams. So I would say one of the signals that you should pay attention to would be, how often are people being selfless, and where are they being selfless in a community, and where do they go that extra mile and add that extra bit of value, not necessarily in a victim type of way or that they're working late till 11 p.m., but they just go a little bit further to help another team member that might be struggling a bit, or to help a project get across the line. And those individuals could be hidden champions. I'll tell a quick story here, very fast. One of the tools that's available right now to organizations is social networking tools, which sounds like social media, but it's not. But effectively what it is when you use a specific type of tool inside an environment, such as a corporate environment and the email environment, to determine who are the most influential people in terms of how often are people talked to. And one of the companies that I worked for several years ago did an analysis. It was quite leading edge at the time. They were one of the first companies to use social networking tools. And they had a major catastrophic customer outage, which didn't last very long, because they wouldn't in that type of an organization. But when something went down, it would get fixed fast, usually within a couple of minutes. But in this particular case, something didn't get fixed for a couple of hours, and possibly for coming up to 18 hours or 24 hours. I think it was under 24 hours. And that was a big deal for them to have an outage like that. So they did the social networking tool specific to that customer and that particular outage. And then they identified who did everybody go to solve that problem? Who were the largest sort of nodes in the social network that got the most amount of communication? And they identified 12 people. And what was interesting was that none of those 12 people were on any succession planning whatsoever. And that was a huge wake-up call for the management team, because they thought, wow, these people obviously have corporate knowledge, they have technological knowledge. They're the top 12 people that helped us solve this massive customer problem, and that none of the rest of us could solve. And yet they're not on the radar anywhere. And that completely changed how they addressed pipelining talent in the organization.
Well, that's great, Charles, because the more we share of more definition to what we're talking about, the easier it is for everybody to understand and maybe embrace it and take full advantage of it. Catherine.
Well, I love that you brought that up, Charles, because I was thinking that when people recognize other people's strong suits, and you can build on that, and when you can create a culture where people are open, they feel safe to voice their opinions, to voice their ideas, and how can we move this over here? A little change of perspective sometimes makes a big difference. And I think that they were so smart to be looking for the people that actually solved the problem, instead of the culture that has an eye out for what's going wrong. And I think it just makes a world of difference when you can create a culture of openness and recognize absolutely the contribution, and recognize, oh my gosh, there's a big hole over here, and how can we all pull together, or who can we talk to help bring that along as well, because putting your head in the sand never works.
Yeah, that's so true. Dave.
Yeah, so I'll take Charles's cue on the question of what to look for, the hidden skills. From the military standpoint, I don't know that there is a right answer. I think we've tried to codify what makes a great leader. We've put millions of dollars into the effort through the years. I don't know that we're always successful. I mean, we see bad leaders all the time, where people have, come in under the radar, and things that were negative have made it through, and they've been just absolutely abhorrent as senior leaders. But that being said, many, 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 many more times we get it right. And I think that, we've brought up the physical fitness point. Sean makes another comment about his time in Navy boot camp, where we would lock arms, and that team mentality, if you can convey that out loud or subtly, that's a hidden sign of someone you need to champion, someone you need to take in and make a leader. But it goes beyond just the physical fitness side, whether it's a 10K or sit-ups or a marathon or whatever. I think that as we look at people, it takes, and we'll go back a couple of weeks in our talks, and I've said this many times through the years, is get out of the ivory tower leadership. It comes back to getting to know your people and watching them. Get away from your desk. Smell the coffee on their breath, so to speak, as some friends of mine like to say in the counterintelligence world, and watch them silently. Don't get in their knickers. Don't get into their business. Just watch them and see what they're doing. And maybe you'll see that they're going over and asking people how they can help, asking people what they're doing so they can learn and, move up on their own. A strong focus, a strong passion for their own work and others. That's a hidden talent that people don't really look for. And again, a willingness to take on other people's work to help them out in that team building process. But one of the things, and to your point, Charles, the military, I think that we failed in the leadership process, and I think we're going to hopefully get back to it. I won't go into Mr. Hegseth's speech last week, but risk taking. If someone's willing to take risks beyond what the dictated, SOP, a standard operating procedure, says to do, and try something new, whether it fails or succeeds, but learn from it, I think you've got a champion there, and someone you need to champion. And looking for problem-solving skills in that process of taking risks are key indicators of the hidden values that you're asking about, Sean.
Well, you bring up some great distinctions. And what comes to mind is we talk about, and we have talked about, champions who did it on their own, right? Rose from the ashes. But in a lot of sense, we can look at it as co-champions, right? That maybe because of 2 or 3 people as a team joining together, it allows that champion spirit and resource to come to the surface.
If I may, real quick, Don, I think if I can jump in again, sorry. I think this is where, if we look at leadership coaching, Jocko Willink is one of the best at this in his Echelon Front company, is the team mentality. We think of SEAL teams. They have a saying in the SEAL teams that 2 is 1 and 1 is none. And what that means is your swim buddy and you are a team. 2 is 1. You've got to do everything together. But if you do it separately, you've got nothing. And I think that's where, if we can build a team that beyond just yourself and championing yourself, but the whole team, then everybody wins and you rise, as a group.
Yeah, and I think, again, to Charles's point and Catherine's points earlier, especially the one that someone who studies failure, and usually that's an unpleasant area. You want to, just like anything else, why deal with someone who failed? But if they turned it around and made a success out of it, they're going to be more appreciative and grateful for that accomplishment. And one of the key things, will it last? How many high flyers do you see break out of the gate and for a year or 2, they're on top of the world, and then a couple years later, they're an unknown or even an embarrassment to themselves? So I think if you do it for a cause, you do it for a reason, you do it for a person, it has more permanency. If you do it just for the material benefit of it, you're going to have to continue to do it in that way. And it kind of shows true character. And is a champion just somebody who wins a big race or a big fight? Or is it someone through their whole life and their relationships continues to be a champion in so many different ways? So is a champion multifaceted and have resources and wanting to share it and build for others? It's that altruism that really makes that champion, whether it's picking up somebody who fell on the race, whether it's awareness of, human need and character, and really being somewhat heart-driven, right? When you do things you don't really have to do, nobody even know if you did them, but you feel obligated because it made it for you, maybe it can make it for someone else, kind of pass it along. Here's Meryl says, Tactics, written by Edward de Bono. Here's the link to the book recommended by Charles. Well, great. Meryl, you're singing from the same page as we are today. So again, thank you so much for being here. And Sean says, Dave Snell, excellent point about leaders coming out of the tower. I had the opportunity to attend a master class with Lee Cockerell Pryor, EVT of Ops at Walt Disney World. And he shared same idea that effective leaders have boots on the ground to understand the front lines. And, that's another thing. No one's going to follow somebody who isn't doing what they're asking other people to do. You've got to be the model. You've got to be the higher focus point to show, if I can do it, you can do it. And I can help you do it if you can't. And I think then, again, responsibility and accountability fall on the person's shoulders who decide I want to be more than I have been. And now I got an opportunity and maybe somebody with me to help me. And I think that goes a long way. Charles?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, thanks for sharing that link, Meryl. I'm thinking of the question that Sean asked earlier, what's one act of recognition that changed your trajectory or restored your faith in your own voice? I don't think I have a actual answer to that, but I have a story that was actually a championship story that had me recognize the power of being in a team. And when I was living in Canada, I did a lot of sailing. I still sail when I can now, but at the time in Canada, for the first 25, 30 years of my life, I was sailing all the time and a lot of competitive sailing. And when I was just in my teens and joined, usually I raced boats with my family, my dad and my sisters and other crew, excuse me, but there was a point where I had the opportunity to join another racing boat and become part of their crew. And we went away for a week to a particular regatta. And I didn't really understand the significance of this regatta. And there were boats from other countries that were competing in our division, and the whole regatta actually. And I was about maybe 14, 15 years old. And I remember that we had a series of races that week. And then we would get down to the final race, and the positioning of the boats in the final race made the difference on whether or not we would actually become the champions for the week. And that was a really, really tough week. It was very competitive racing. It was very, very intense. The winds were strong. We were sailing what were called 8 meters, which is a scaled down version of what the America's Cup used to be sailed on 12 meters. So this is about a 45-foot boat. So it was a pretty intense week, and sometimes tempers got a bit high, or sometimes voices got a bit high. Sometimes, and you would think it would be because of the emotions, but sometimes it was just because of the wind, because the wind was so high that the person at the front of the boat had to yell for the person at the back of the boat to hear what was going on. Anyway, we come down to the finish line, and we actually crossed the finish line and won the Gooderham's Cup, was what they called it, and for the week, and became the champions for the week for that particular year. And you would compete in this regatta once a year to win the Gooderham's Cup. And when we crossed the finish line and had officially won, the crew, 8 of us, not me, but the other 7, went absolutely ballistic. And I was absolutely overwhelmed at how excited they were that we had won. I had never seen anything, never experienced anything like this. I went to a high school at the time I was suffering the legacy of the lonely long distance runner, because I was too small and too frail to be on the rugby team and the football team and things like that. And I remember this was my first experience of being on a team. It was my first experience of really winning something significant. And I'll never forget that. And that changed my trajectory in terms of appreciating the power of a team to work together to be successful and achieve something.
Yeah, that's so encouraging. Thank you for that. And we've got Nicole here. Thank you, Nicole. Great to see you. Nicole's a champion in my book, and is distinguished herself by writing her own book and helping other people with that. So if you don't know Nicole, another great connection on LinkedIn. Nicole's been on the show in the past, so always glad to see you. Sean says, looking forward to sharing my book project when published. That's all about leadership from a newer, deeper perspective. Well, we welcome the opportunity to showcase it when it's available. I guess you two know each other. Great. Wow, resonance. I used to race with Vallejo Yacht Club, taught me so much and brought me so much joy. Well, a lot of commonality. Wow, an athlete's mindset ain't no joke. Take serious discipline. You know, what we're doing and what everybody's doing can benefit from those same qualities and attributes that a champion uses. right? So, you know, you can always do a little bit better, care a little bit more. And I think it's that really incremental increase in capabilities that allows people to champion their cause. You know, I always believe whatever you do, be the best at it you can. You know, a lot of people say, well, when the nice, better opportunity, I'll go to work. I'll really do something, you know, and that day will never come. But if you start doing a little bit every day towards something and building that reserve and that discipline, and, you know, there is something nice at the end of the day. Say, I did something worthwhile for someone today, and I learned something and I grew a little bit. And if you can have that philosophy every day, you don't have to be totally disappointed when it doesn't work out the first time or the second time. And it may even put you on a better path that you would have never found without going on the initial path. Catherine.
Oh, well, I just love this because I think that it's so important and reveals the importance of our own self-responsibility for developing the skills as best we can to learn to be a conscious contributor. And I think that makes the big difference.
Very good. Thank you so much, Catherine. Dave, last words?
Yeah, I know we're at the hour mark, but I had a couple of comments, and I did want to answer Sean's question, his second question. But to this point, I highly recommend everybody read Lee Cockrell, at least one of his books. He was an amazing vice president, EVP, whatever he was at Walt Disney World, and being a big fan of Disney and the processes that they undertake to build leaderships and leaders and champions and champion their own people, I think is amazing. And Lee Cockrell is a master at that effort. But to answer Sean's question, you know, what was something, I think the lesson here is that a champion and that recognition that you get isn't instantaneous all the time. Sometimes it takes a few minutes, a few moments, a few years. And in my case, 2.5, 3 years ago, I got with Heather Monahan and one of her cohorts. She's down in Miami. We did this all virtually. But that led me here to Don. And it helped me find my voice. I was not a public speaker, I didn't think. I wasn't, I mean, we've mentioned this before. I mean, the first couple of times I did this, the back of my shirt was just drenched in sweat. I didn't know what to say. I was nervous, but as literally found my voice going through this, and then having that conversation with you a couple of weeks ago or last week, Don, about, you know, helping find your passion, my passion in this case. It's taken a long time for me to find it. And through the recognition of people saying, look, I've watched your videos, I've seen you on podcasts, I've seen you in front of a crowd, you need to do public speaking. And it's something I've talked about for years, but I think because of these last few weeks with Don talking to you and a couple of other people, maybe that is my passion. Maybe that's what I need to be doing. I don't know. But if that's the answer, I think that's the answer to Sean's question for me.
Well, the magic is in the maybes. And as long as you have those, you've got different opportunities. Just to finish up on the comments, I know we're running a little bit. I appreciate a discussion of failure. I was reading in the Maxwell Daily Reader about how a University of Houston professor actually developed a Failure 101 course. I think that's outstanding. Mm-hmm. Sharon says support, not enablement. And it's taken me over 40 years to own my leadership. And the last one is Hidden in Plain Sight, Celebrating the Everyday Genius, my podcast and development. Well, good for you, Sharon. I think you're making the right move. And we've got one more. Thanks for the invite link, Meryl Cass. Thank you, Meryl. I see you've been supporting the show during the show. Got more people because of you. So you're the champion of the day too. And I think we can all take a victory lap and consider ourselves champions in the making. So with that said, I want to thank everybody. Wonderful discussion. Come back next week and we'll try to do even better. So thank you. And